Hello and welcome to this video on Mishnah of Shabbat Concept 27. In Mishnah Concept 27, we learn an additional detail about the laws of muktzeh. Muktzeh, like we learned back a few Mishnah Concepts ago, is any object which does not have a use on Shabbat. It's called muktzeh, which means set aside. Means that you are setting it aside from being used for any purpose on Shabbat. However, like I told you last time, there are different levels, there are different types of muktzeh. Mishnah Concept 27 talks about muktzeh machmas isur. What does that mean, muktzeh machmas isur? It means that the thing is set aside from use because the normal use for that object is a forbidden use. For example, a hammer. At the end of this Mishnah concept, we should be able to answer this question. Can you use a hammer on Shabbat? If so, how? Well, we know we definitely can't use a hammer for its intended use, which is knocking in a nail, because that is building, which is one of the types of work not allowed on Shabbat. However, if you find a permissible use for that same object, we're talking about a muktzeh object, which normally is used for something forbidden, and you find something to do with it that is not forbidden. For example, you might say, hey, I misplaced my nutcracker and I have some walnuts to open up for the Shabbat meal, to drop in the salad, and that hammer would really make a good way to break open the walnut. Okay, now you found a permissible and allowed use for something which is normally used for a forbidden use. So can you use the hammer? Yes. You can use the hammer to break open a walnut. You can't use it for its intended use, which is to bang in a nail, which is not allowed on Shabbat. Okay? Here's another example we're going to see in the Mishnah, using a coin as a button. We're going to see, the Mishnah is going to discuss that example. A coin is used for business, which is not allowed on Shabbat. But before Shabbat, you realized, hey, I don't have a button. I have a way to make this coin into a button. We'll see how he does that soon. However, you must set it aside for that use before Shabbat began. In other words, you can't decide this on Shabbat. Oh, let me use this coin as a button, because that's when Shabbat began. It was not able to be used as a button. It was not practical. Even if you did something, which we'll see in the Mishnah, you wrapped a cloth around it, he made an improvised button, that wouldn't be allowed unless you planned that before Shabbat began. Or it must be capable of being used for that. A hammer is capable of being used to break a walnut, so you would probably be allowed, if you ask your local Orthodox rabbi, can I use a hammer to break a walnut on Shabbat? He would probably say yes. Okay? So now you have Mishnah Concept 27. If the muktzeh item is one of those type of muktzeh items that is muktzeh because it's normally used for a forbidden use, if you find a permitted use on Shabbat, you may use that object if it was capable of being used with that before Shabbat began. So now we're going to begin Mishnah Vav and Perek Vav Masechet Shabbat, and we're going to remember two Mishnah concepts that we learned. Number one is, if the item that you're wearing outside on Shabbat is clothing or useful for your body, you need it for some purpose like healing or some other purpose that you need it for your body, then you're allowed to wear it. If it's not clothing or useful for your body, it is considered carrying and you can't wear it on Shabbat. The next Mishnah concept you need to keep in mind, even a muktzeh item that normally you can't move, if you set it aside for a permitted use on Shabbat, you would be allowed. So let's see how those two come together. Yotz'a basala sha'al hatzinit. You can put a coin that's on a wound on someone's foot. If they have a type of a wound on their foot, they used to put a coin over there. They believed that it was helpful medically. So you found a use for a coin. It's as a medicine. Habanot ktanot yotzot bechutin. Young girls that had their ears pierced and they needed to keep the hole of the ears open so that it doesn't close. They can go with chutin, with strings in their ears. La'afilu b'keisamin, even with like pieces of wood, splinters, shabazneyan. Araviyot yotzot ru'ulot. Arab women or women who live in those countries that they wear this type of a headscarf can go wrapped up in it. It's not considered carrying, it's considered wearing. Umadiyot, perufot, and Median women who have this type of cloak that buttons on the shoulder can go out like that. It's considered wearing. And really any person can go wearing such a type of clothing, but the rabbis are teaching us something which is normal for those women to wear that, not men. Parefes ala even. Here's another Mishnah Zayin. We're using a stone here, or a nut or a coin for a button. Remember we said that? So here's how they did it. And it was allowed, and it wasn't considered carrying or muktzah. Parefet ala even va'al ha'egos. You can perform a fastening of a shoulder cloak with a stone, nut, valamatbea, or a coin. As long as you do not wrap it on Shabbat, you have to wrap it before Shabbat. So basically, look at this shirt over here that the lady is wearing, right? If she was missing a button over here, what she can do is she can wrap should take the nut or the coin and put it underneath the clothing, sticking up, and she has a loop over here on this shoulder, and she can tie it around the nut or the coin to keep her clothing on. Mishnah Chet begins. Hakiteya, someone who, God forbid, has an amputated foot. Yotzei bekav shalo, he can go out with a manufactured foot made out of wood or some other material. Divrei Rabbi Meir, that's Rabbi Meir's opinion. Rabbi Yossi oser, Rabbi Yossi does not allow it. V'im yesh lo bet kibol ketusin tamei. And if this fake foot has in it a place to put soft material to soften the walking, then it's considered a vessel, and in the laws of Tumah it could receive impurity. Smochot shalo, if he has, God forbid, no feet and he's walking on like Shin Guards, Tmein midras, if he's impure. Again, to understand this concept, we need to know two things. First of all, that certain types of people are, if they touch certain things, they're impure, and certain types of impurity, if you sit or stand on something, you make the thing that you sat on or stood on impure. So the question is, if someone is impure and he uses these type of Shin Guards because he doesn't have feet and he steps on them, is that considered stepping on it to make it impure? The Mishnah says yes. V'yotz'in bahem b'Shabbat, you're allowed to walk out with them on Shabbat because they're part of your clothing. V'nichnasim bahen ba'azara, and you can go into the courtyard of the Bet HaMikdash wearing them. Now you're going to ask, wait, why wouldn't you be allowed to go into the Bet HaMikdash wearing these things? The answer is, in the Bet HaMikdash, the Kohanim were not allowed to wear shoes. Anyone who would come in, they had to take off their shoes out of respect to the holy place. Just like the story of Moshe Rabbeinu, when he came to the burning bush, he had to take off his shoes. So too, this is respect for the Bet HaMikdash. So if someone doesn't have feet, God forbid, they can still go into the Bet HaMikdash wearing these Shin Guards, and it's not considered shoes. Kisei v'smochot shalo, if he has a chair, he doesn't have, his legs are cut off, God forbid, he has a chair, v'smochot shalo, and he has supports. We're going to see on the next slide pictures of this. Tmeim midras, anything he steps on would be tamei if he's impure. Ve'ein yotzim behem b'Shabbat, but he's not allowed to go out with them on Shabbat. It's considered carrying. Ve'ein nichnasim behem b'azara, he can't go into the Bet HaMikdash with them. Here is a picture of the chair and the supports that he uses to move with. The wheelchair obviously was not invented at that time, so that poor fellow had to walk around like that. That's what the Mishnah is talking about. On Katmin, a mask. They would have these different masks for dress up. Tahorin is not considered a vessel and it cannot receive impurity. It's pure. Ve'ein yotzim behen, you cannot wear a mask out in the street on Shabbat. Another explanation for an Katmin is like a big horse costume where two people would put on a costume and pretend to be a horse. It's not allowed to be worn like that on Shabbat. Last Mishnah in this lesson, Habanim yotzin bakesharim. Young boys can go out with a band tied around their arm. Now, what is that? The Gemara explains, basically, if they were missing their parents, so their father would tie a tie around them that reminds them of their parents. They shouldn't feel lonely. So that, even though it's not clothing, but it's considered useful. Ubnei melachim, and princes bazugin can go with bells on their clothing, or like little ornaments dangling on their clothing because they're, fancy schmancy people. They're the prince. They have to walk out with this. V'chal adam, really any person can do that. Ela shadibru chachamim bahova. The rabbi spoke about the normal case. It was normal for princes to be dressed like that, not for regular people. The Mishnah continues, Yotz'in bebeitzat hachargol uv'shein shual. Now here's a very interesting situation. There were people that were ill, and they had these different remedies that they would wear. Some of them had a medical help, some of them were just superstitions. So we're going to see, are you allowed to wear these things? And if you're allowed to wear them, are you allowed to wear them on Shabbat? So the Mishnah says, Yotzin b'beitzat hachargol. You can go out with a grasshopper egg tied around your ear, some type of a healing for an earache. They would do that. Not sure if it was a superstition or if it was really helpful. Uveshein shual, and a fox tooth. Right? They would wear a fox tooth around their neck for some other healing, would help them fall asleep. Could be that's superstition. Uvemasmer min hatzaluv, and a nail, and a certain type of a nail that they would wrap on a wound. Rabbi Mishum Refuah, for healing practices. Div Rabbi Meir, that's Rabbi Meir's opinion. V'chachamim omrim, the rabbis say, af b'chol asur, even if it's not Shabbat, you're forbidden to have these things on your body. Mishum darkei ha'emori, it's not a Jewish practice, it's the ways of the Emorim who worshipped idols and superstitions, and they believed they had some type of spirits and gods that would heal them if they wear these things. And since it's not a Jewish practice, the rabbis said we should not wear them even during the week.